Most people announce every goal before they've achieved anything. They talk about the business they're starting, the body they're building, the money they're going to make, and the life they're planning to create. Then months later, nothing has changed. The people who truly transform their lives often do the opposite. They disappear. Not from existence, not from responsibility, they disappear from the conversation. Think about it. The moment you tell someone what you're planning to do, something strange happens inside your mind. You feel a small wave of satisfaction, a flicker of pride, as if the goal itself has been partially completed simply by being spoken out loud. This feeling is real, and it is also a trap. The brain often cannot fully distinguish between the relief of being seen as ambitious and the actual labor of becoming something. So the moment you announce, you quietly siphon off a portion of the motivation you would have needed to finish. This is why so many people start strong and vanish within weeks, not because they lack ability, because they spent their fuel on the applause before the race even began. Most people never realize that attention is not neutral. It changes the thing it touches. The uncomfortable truth is that a goal exposed too early often dies from exposure, the way certain photographs are ruined the moment light reaches them before they're developed. An idea, a plan, a new version of yourself. These things need darkness to take shape. Darkness is not the absence of progress. It is the condition progress requires. Look closely at the people in your life who actually changed, not the ones who talked about changing, the ones who actually did. Somewhere in their story there is almost always a gap, a period where they got quiet, where they stopped posting, stopped explaining, stopped showing up to the conversations they used to dominate. People around them noticed the silence before they noticed the results. That sequence is not an accident. It is the mechanism. Here's what most people miss. Disappearing is not running away from life. It is not isolation, and it is not hiding from responsibility. It is a deliberate reduction of noise so that signal can finally be heard. You cannot hear your own ambition over the sound of other people's opinions about it. The moment you remove the audience, you are left alone with the actual work, and the actual work has nowhere to hide. There is no crowd to perform for, no comment section to satisfy, no relative to impress at dinner. Just you and the thing you said you wanted, finally facing each other without an audience to soften the encounter. This is where things change for the people who understand it. Once the noise drops, a different kind of person starts to emerge. Someone who is no longer building a personality around potential, but building actual capability. Someone who stops rehearsing the story of who they're going to become and starts quietly becoming it. Pay attention to what happens next when someone disappears in this way. The people around them react before anything has even happened. Family members ask why they've gotten quiet. Friends joke that they've changed or gone cold or become distant. Notice the discomfort in their voices. It rarely comes from concern. It comes from losing the ability to monitor you. As long as you were narrating your life out loud, they could track your position. They knew where you stood relative to them. The instant you stop narrating, that comfort disappears, and what replaces it is uncertainty. Uncertainty about your status. Uncertainty about whether you're still struggling like they assumed or quietly passing them. This is why absence unsettles people more than failure does. Failure is at least legible. It confirms the story people already believed about you. Silence confirms nothing. It leaves a blank space, and the human mind despises blank spaces. It will fill that space with something, usually one of two stories. Either you've given up or you've found something they don't have access to. Both stories cost you nothing. Only one of them is usually true. The surprising part is that this dynamic exists everywhere, not just in big life transformations. It exists in a friend group when one person quietly stops drinking and never explains why. It exists in a family when one sibling stops asking for advice and starts making decisions alone. It exists at work when a colleague who used to complain about the same frustrations suddenly stops complaining and starts producing results no one expected. In every case, the people around them feel a small, involuntary discomfort long before they feel admiration. Respect rarely arrives first. Suspicion does. Admiration only comes later, once the results can no longer be denied. This is why so many people sabotage their own transformation before it even starts. They confuse the early discomfort of others for disapproval of the goal itself, instead of recognizing it as nothing more than other people losing their grip on a story they used to control. If you don't understand this, you will retreat the moment people get uncomfortable. If you do understand it, you will recognize their discomfort as the first sign that something in the hierarchy is shifting. Consider the version of this that plays out in fitness. Someone decides to change their body. They tell everyone. They post the before photo, the gym selfies, the meal prep, the motivational captions. For the first 2 weeks, they receive a flood of encouragement, and that encouragement feels almost as good as the changes they're hoping to see. Then the weeks pass, the novelty fades, the comments slow down, and the dopamine that used to come from validation stops arriving on schedule. Without that external supply, many people lose momentum entirely because they had quietly outsourced their motivation to an audience instead of building it internally. Now compare that to someone who decides the same thing and says nothing. No announcement, no before photo. They simply show up day after day with no one watching and no one to perform for. 3 months later, people notice the change in their face, their posture, the way they carry themselves, and they ask what happened. The answer is short. Nothing happened. They just worked. That sentence, delivered without explanation, carries more weight than any caption ever could. The same pattern repeats in business and career. Picture 2 people who both want to leave their jobs and build something of their own. One of them talks about it constantly at dinners, in group chats, during long conversations with anyone who will listen. The other says nothing. They quietly study the market, build the skill, save the money, write the plan, and tell absolutely no one until the thing is already standing on its own legs. The first person spends a year explaining an idea. The second person spends a year building one. When both finally reveal what they've been doing, only one of them has anything real to show. This is why some people become visibly uncomfortable when someone they know quietly succeeds. It isn't the success itself that disturbs them. It's the realization that the entire process happened without their input, their encouragement, or their permission. Think about how often people confuse talking about ambition with possessing it. The two feel almost identical in the moment, which is exactly why the confusion is so dangerous. Talking activates the same reward circuitry as doing, but only one of them produces an outcome you can stand on later. The danger isn't that talking is wrong. The danger is that it quietly replaces doing, while convincing you that something has been accomplished. This is also why public goals create a particular kind of false satisfaction. The moment you tell 5 people you're going to change your finances, repair a relationship, or finally finish the project you've delayed for years, you receive a small social reward immediately. Encouragement, praise, a few compliments on your ambition. That reward arrives instantly, while the real reward, the actual transformation, might be months or years away. Most people, without realizing it, will choose the immediate reward over the delayed one, again and again, because the brain is wired to prefer certainty now over uncertainty later. This is not weakness. It is a basic feature of human psychology, and the people who understand it use that knowledge to remove the easy reward entirely, forcing themselves toward the only reward that actually matters. Money behaves the same way. Most people manage their finances the way they manage their image, performatively. They post the new purchase, mention the raise in passing, let people know the investment is paying off, while quietly avoiding any mention of the debt still sitting underneath it. Financial improvement, the real kind, almost never looks impressive in the moment it's happening. It looks like silence. It looks like someone who stopped explaining their spending, stopped competing over appearances, and started making decisions no one else gets to see. Which subscription got canceled? Which account got automated? which short-term comfort got sacrificed for a number that won't mean anything to anyone for another 2 or 3 years. The uncomfortable truth is that the version of you with real financial security rarely looks wealthy while building it. They look unremarkable, almost boring, and by the time anyone notices the difference, the gap has already become difficult to close. Social media simply industrialized a habit that always existed. Before any of it, people still announced their plans at dinner tables, in phone calls, in passing conversations designed to extract a reaction. What changed is the speed and the volume of the reward. Now the praise arrives in seconds from strangers, in quantities no dinner table could ever produce. This is why the trap closes faster than it used to. A single post about a goal can generate more apparent validation than a year of actual labor, and the brain, never built to distinguish between earned respect and borrowed attention, treats them as nearly the same thing. Notice how often the most aggressive announcers of growth are the ones who never seem to finish growing. The cycle resets indefinitely because the reward was never tied to completion. It was tied to performance. The uncomfortable truth is that many people who claim they want feedback don't actually want feedback. They want reassurance disguised as feedback. And the moment that reassurance doesn't arrive in the exact form they hoped for, their motivation collapses. This is one of the quiet dangers of seeking validation from people who are not building anything themselves. A person who has never built a business has no real authority to evaluate your business idea, yet their casual skepticism can derail months of momentum, simply because their opinion was given more weight than it deserved. The strategic move isn't to seek their approval. It's to stop asking and let the results answer the question for you later, when there's nothing left to argue with. Look closely at how this plays out in relationships and family dynamics. Someone tries to set a boundary with a parent or a partner, and they explain themselves extensively, hoping the explanation will be met with understanding. Often it isn't. The explanation becomes an opening for negotiation, guilt, or resistance. But notice what happens when someone simply enforces a boundary without explaining it at all. There's far less room for argument because there's nothing offered to argue against. This is not coldness, it's precision. The people who protect their peace most effectively are rarely the ones who justify every decision. They are the ones who act and let the consistency of their behavior speak on their behalf. This is why some people become uncomfortable when you quietly improve. A friend who used to share every struggle with you stops sharing as much, not because the friendship ended, but because they no longer need narration to process their life. A family member who used to ask for guidance starts making decisions independently. A coworker who used to vent at lunch starts skipping those conversations because they're focused elsewhere. In every one of these situations, the people who relied on your visibility for their own sense of comparison or closeness experience a kind of quiet loss, not because you took anything from them, but because your growth no longer requires their presence in the same way it used to. This is where the real distinction begins to surface, the difference between attention and respect. Attention is loud, immediate, and easy to generate. You can get attention by announcing things, by performing struggle, by inviting people into every stage of your process. Respect is slower, quieter, and far more selective. It is not given in response to announcements. It is given in response to results that speak without needing translation. Attention asks people to watch you. Respect requires nothing from them at all. It simply exists once they've seen what you've built. The danger of mistaking one for the other is that attention can feel like progress while producing none. You can spend years being known as someone who is working on something, celebrated for effort that never resolves into anything concrete, mistaking visibility for momentum. Meanwhile, the quiet builder, the one no one was watching, returns one day with something undeniable, and the difference becomes impossible to ignore. This is why many people fear disappearing in the first place. not because the work itself frightens them, but because they fear being forgotten in the process. They believe visibility is what keeps them relevant, what keeps them loved, what keeps them from disappearing in a more permanent sense. But look closely at what actually happens to the people who step back, focus, and return having built something real. They are not forgotten. They are reconsidered. People who once overlooked them are forced to recalculate, often uncomfortably, because the silent period produced something the loud period never could. Real confidence is rarely built in front of an audience. It's built in the repetitions no one saw, the early mornings no one congratulated you for, the failures no one had to know about because no one was watching closely enough to notice. Confidence built this way doesn't need external validation to survive, because it was never dependent on it in the first place. This is the quiet advantage of building without an audience. By the time you return, you no longer need anyone's permission to believe in what you've made. You already know because you were the only witness and you were enough. The people who command the most respect are rarely the ones who constantly announce what they're doing. They are often the ones who quietly disappear, build something valuable, return transformed, and feel no need to explain themselves. Their silence was never a wound to be healed. It was a method. While others were busy narrating their potential, they were busy converting it into something real, something that no longer requires a single word of justification, because it has already spoken for itself. So ask yourself honestly how much of your energy this year has gone toward being seen, and how much has gone toward becoming something worth seeing. The answer to that question, more than any goal you could announce tonight, will determine which version of your life you're actually living toward.